Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Blokes podcast. Ryan Hassan here from the Centre for Healing, joined by Nick Sutherland from Myndfit. Nico, how are you?
A little bit silly, I suppose.
A bit silly. I feel a bit silly
But
too today.
it's silly. It's a great word, silly. I take clients across to the park and we stand there and yell at trees and tell them to hurry up and grow, and just to help people move into an awareness of how irrational they're being in their
Yeah.
life. And silly is the number one word that comes up. How are you feeling? Silly. This is silly. I think it's such a great word. It's just a silly because it's it can be playful, silly, but it can be that's a bit silly. So it can sort of sway down either end of the spectrum. I think.
Yeah, because sometimes people equate silly and stupid. It's like, oh, you're being silly and
Yeah,
stupid, but I like
yeah,
silly. Silly is playful to me.
yes,
Uh,
yeah, same. Well, you can use it in different contexts. So
Yeah, you can.
today I'm feeling a bit silly.
It's silly. There's a guy where we're staying at the minute on Samui, and we're kind of at the top of a hill, and just down the hill here, I pass him every day. There's an old Thai man, and he has there's like a garden patch. And he's growing tomatoes and herbs and all sorts of stuff. But every time I go past on the bike, he's literally just sitting in one of those fold out like camping chairs, just sitting there, just looking at his garden. This is so beautiful. And he's not. I bet
Wow.
you. I bet you. He's. Well, I don't know. I'm not in his head, but I bet you he's not saying, "Come on, hurry up and grow." He just sit. And I feel like I've made this whole story in my head of he's had this big hard life and he's worked in hard labor, and all blah blah blah, and now he just sits back in his garden just watching with his dogs, and it's really cool though. I get inspired looking at him because he's literally just sitting in a chair just looking at his garden.
Ah, so I have a different story. I feel that he's been to the school of stillness, and he's a still scholar, and he's just practicing his craft. He's just
A
sitting there, just
still
being still.
scholar.
Yes.
The diploma, a master's in stillness. Yeah. Yeah, he's like an older
Yeah.
Thai version of you, Nick. I can see you doing that when you get a bit older.
Totally. I was just we put up some temporary fencing for the dogs today, and I was just sitting there, just looking at it earlier, just going, oh, just yeah. And then I thought, imagine if someone walks past, there's just this bloke sitting there staring at a fence.
Yeah. It's like that meme of it's like at a cafe or something, or no, it might be on the train, and like everyone's on their phone just staring, and then there's that one bloke, and it's something like, oh, there's always that one freak
Yeah,
who's just
that's the
sitting there
roller
staring.
coaster.
Is it?
Yeah, it's the roller coaster, and everyone's freaking out on the way down. And he's just sitting there, very stoic, just like. "Mm."
Yeah.
I posted that when I first came out of the Vipassana retreat. I was like everyone else, and then me after Vipassana. And I was just because I went to King Island to play golf straight after the Vipassana retreat, and
Ah.
it was howling, and it was a gale, and everyone was in suffering. Everyone on the course, like it was, the scorecards were blown away. It stopped being about the score. It just turned into a matter of survival. And everyone's like, "This is fucked. I just want to go back to the hotel and have a beer and get near the fire because it was cold and wet and like 80 km/h winds." And and I was just smiling all the way around, going, "Oh, well, isn't nature amazing?" Da, 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 da. I
Yeah.
was like, "What the fuck's wrong with you, man?"
Yeah, they
And I was like,
they
"Ah,
liken
nothing,
it,
just
the awakening experience to like when you're at a party and all of a sudden you sober up, but everyone else is still drunk, and you just start to see things in a
ah,
different way. And I remember I had that experience even with, I love my sport now. Still, I still love watching sport and that kind of thing. But I remember after I had my waking up experience, I just thought it was. I thought I just saw it as being really silly. Like I started watching like football again, and I would start laughing about how serious I used to get about a bunch of men like
mm.
trying to get this
Yeah, we
football through
spoke
some
about
sticks.
this
I think we've
in
spoken
another
about it. Yeah,
episode.
yeah. And yeah, I just saw it as so strange, and that experience changed for me so much just watching sport because I'm like, this is what why was I so intense about this before? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like,
But
it's really funny.
it's weird though. If you go to footy with three mates, so there's four of you, and they're all still drunk, to use your metaphor,
Yeah.
and you're sober or you're awake, we actually have to try and get drunk just to stay connected with those people a little bit. Like
Yeah.
we have to. Someone said being woke it isn't awesome. It's fucking hard because you gotta their words dumb yourself down to other people's level and just
Yeah.
sort of
But
stay. I don't like that
I don't
terminology,
like
but
that term either because I think because one's not even better than the other.
no,
It's
exactly.
just it's just different.
It's
It's just a different experience.
totally. But Shane and I played golf yesterday, and
Yeah.
like I said I can't wait till Hass is back so I can go and tee it up.
Me too. I'm
Um,
hanging. I'm hanging.
Come on, man. And so we played the other week, and Shano had a bit of a club toss. There was a
Oh
bit of
yeah.
a bit of frustration, bit of lob wedge getting lobbed over that way, and he no club tosses yesterday, and we both played okay, like a few birdies, a few bogeys, whatnot. Um, but he was talking after. He goes, "Oh, it's like." Oh, he's talking to Zach about it. The other trainer we got. He's like, it's like Nick didn't even ride the roller coaster. Nick didn't have that emotional experience. You know, he wasn't. He just cruised around. He didn't yay when he got a birdie or oh when he got a bogey.
Yeah.
And I said, it's funny you mentioned that because I played golf randomly. You know, sometimes you turn up to a course and you're just paired with someone else or whatever. Played golf with this dude and he said the same thing. He goes, mate, it's like you weren't even enjoying it out there. And I was like, that's a really interesting observation because I've really had a great time.
Mm.
And he said, why? And we sort of chatted about it. And we came to the conclusion, I came to the conclusion that destructive energy is very external and loud, and constructive energy is very internal and quiet.
Mm.
So this dude couldn't see my emotions. I was in a deep sense of gratitude and appreciation. I was very present. I was just observing, and I was like, okay, if I hit a bad shot, okay, well that's interesting. I wasn't attached to desired outcomes or anything, so I wasn't going into that suffering. So a lack of suffering to him meant that I wasn't enjoying it. I wasn't
You
invested in it.
weren't externally showing that emotion. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's
but I love just turning up, and if I'm playing bad, I love it when someone's playing good. I love that experience, like and so yeah, it was an interesting one. It's sort of like that. I can't remember the exact meme, but it's um, you must have heard it, I reckon, about um, people think you're insane, but they can't hear the music that you can hear or something.
okay.
Have you heard
Okay.
that one?
Yeah. No, I haven't. But
Oh no,
it
it's like
makes
people think you're mad because they can see you dancing, but they can't hear the music.
right. Yeah.
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 So I'm over there doing my thing, just cruising around the golf course, just very, connected to nature and present and non-attached and just having a great old time. But he can't hear my music, so he's looking at
Yes.
me, go all confused.
Yeah, yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, I've been following on YouTube Kyle Berkshire, who's the world long drive champion, and
Yeah.
he's making this. It's really interesting. He wants to become a pro golfer, so he's still doing the long drive, making this transition, but he's um,
Same as that Jamie Sadowski dude.
right. Okay. Okay. But
Yeah.
I was listening to one of his because he does like vlogs of him playing 9 or 18
Oh yeah.
holes, and he was saying that he played around with Justin Thomas the week before. And
Mhm.
for those who don't know, Justin Thomas, I think he's probably top five in the world on the PGA Tour, and they were just playing around somewhere. And at the end of the round, Kyle's like, "You just shot like 8 under. You just shot a 64," and Justin Thomas had no idea. He's like, "Oh,
Mhm.
cool." Like there's no attachment. Now, obviously, in tournament play, you've probably got to keep an eye on the leaderboard and that kind of thing. But it made me think that the day that I had my best ever round, I did the same thing. My friend who I was playing with, or playing with some other random guy, he was scoring, but I was just sort of at the end of the hole. So yeah, I had that, I'd had no idea what I was scoring. And then we were sitting down having our coffee afterwards. He goes, "Mate, you shot a 76," and I was like, "Oh, did I?" And so it was so weird. It's like it's that non-attachment, because I that many times I'd play golf and you get like, there might be 4 holes to go and you're like, if I pop par these last 4, I'm going to get
Mm.
this score. And then all of a sudden the
Yeah.
body tenses up.
And you stop being present. Shane did it in
Exactly.
cricket the other day, and it's such a great example of it's what's the word? It's not binary. What's the where there's no opposites. Everything's the same. What's that?
Non-dualistic.
Non-dualistic or whatever.
Yep.
So we're mindless, but we're mindful at the same time.
Hmm.
So we're not in our thoughts, but we're very present. So we're very mindful, but we're mindless as well.
Yep.
So
Oh
we
yeah.
have no awareness of what's going on. Like, and Shane said he's been playing really good cricket lately. Hasn't gone out for like 6 weeks, and then his ego popped up. And ego is the one that creates all this attachment. Ego is what craves, and so he saw this 16-year-old, and the ego popped up and he went, "Yeah, I'm going to send him over the fence," and
Yeah.
then bang, bold middle stump, and he's just like, "Oh fuck," yeah, because he stopped being present, stopped doing what he was doing for the last 6 weeks, which was just going out there and taking the ball at a time.
Yeah, yep, yeah. No, I was my favorite batsman to watch was Brian Lara as a kid. I just loved watching him bat, and when there was those times where he'd get in, and you listen to all the great like, McGrath and Warne and bowlers from other countries as well, and I would always say like if you got a Brian Lara who was in, and he would describe it as a state of not
Yeah,
thinking at all, and they would say you could
yeah.
not bowl to him anywhere because he was in that flow state. You couldn't.
Ricky Ponting would do the same as well. It's like no matter where you bowled it, where you pitched it, he was so in the zone. He was like liquid at the other end, and he just
Yeah.
all of a sudden he'd just be there, and the ball was there, and it was. Imagine how frustrating it is as a bowler when someone's in that flow state.
Yeah, I remember what Lara would do. He'd play these shots, and hit boundaries, and they'd put a fielder there, and the next ball he'd hit it where that fielder was, before
Yeah.
just to rub a bit of salt into the wound.
That's in full control, and
Yeah.
that's the thing. So there's a difference between so many people think they're in control, but it's actually the majority of the time that's an anxiety-based behavior. It's a clinging. I'm holding onto this thing, and I think I'm in control. I feel in control,
Hmm.
but you're not actually in control because if you're truly in control, you've got the freedom to let go and to go and do what you want. So being in that flow, non-attached, hyper-present almost state is in when you're in full control because you're just, all right, I'm just here and there and I'm just letting go and I'm just trusting that, yeah, I've done
It's
it
the
a couple of
control
times.
paradox, isn't it? It's the control paradox.
Yeah.
The more I'm trying to control, the more out of control I feel. But the more I let go of control, the more I feel in control. It's this. It's
Well,
this
it's getting so on a cognitive level, we're talking in Myndfit about getting distorted at your distortions. So you'll get anxious about something, and then you'll become aware that you're anxious. So then you'll get more anxious that you're anxious, and you
yeah,
just deepen this state of feeling anxious and living in fear.
yeah.
But chatting with a client the other day, you can have the converse effect as well. If you're feeling really calm and you come into awareness that you're calm, that'll deepen your sense of calmness.
Yeah.
So whatever we're feeling, if when we become aware of it, it's just usually going to
Yeah.
deepen that state for
We
us.
have very similar philosophy. Yeah, we talk about yeah, very similar thing. One's where we get stuck in the loop, the destructive loops. So it's like, yeah, if I'm a guy and I'm angry, or if I'm scared, or I'm sad, then I'll get angry that I'm sad, or I'll get sad that I'm sad, and I'm just like circling and circling and circling, and I'm starting to marinate in it. But yeah, like you
Yeah.
said, you can do it the other way as well. One of the things that we teach is resourcing. So finding a place of calm, whether that's in the body, whether that's in a memory or a place, or whether that's in an imagined place, we can find that state of calm in us, and then start to work with that and cultivate it, and start to have that grow, and then we become more familiar with the feeling of calm. Because some people, I'm sure you
Mm.
see as well, the clients that I work with haven't really felt completely calm and relaxed for years, maybe decades, which is a
That
long
just
time,
reminded
which
me
is a
of,
long time to not feel calm and relaxed.
oh, completely. It reminded me of a client. I think I've spoken about her before, but she's doing all this work about letting go of her attachments and, using a more logical and rational mind and just allowing things to be, staying in the reality of what is. And she came into a session and I'm like, "How are you?" And she's like, "Oh, I think I'm bored." And she was mistaking bored for being at peace because she'd never experienced peace, so she didn't know how to term it or label it or describe it.
Yeah.
So, have you seen the wheel of emotions that it's a
Uh,
poster you can get?
yeah, I think you've showed me. You've got one there at Myndfit, don't you?
Yeah,
Yes.
but we got the cushion the other day. I saw it comes on a
All right.
cushion now, so I've chucked the cushion on the couch.
Yeah.
And now when clients come in, we've got a rule that they're not allowed to say the word good. So when I say, "How are you?" if they say good, they've got to do 10 push-ups on the spot.
10
And
push-ups. This goes back to your
yeah,
military background.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
blending it all.
Yeah.
And and it works. It's really bloody effective. But the same as they figured to bring their notepad and pen, 10 push-ups. It was funny, I had a pregnant client, so she couldn't do the push-ups, so she had to pass them on to her husband, who was also doing the program. So he'd walk in, I'm like, do 10 push-ups. He's like, but I've got everything. I haven't even said good. I'm like, yeah, but your missus was in yesterday and she forgot hers. And that acted as a really good source of stimulus. So it was also, is he going to react to this or is he
Yeah.
just going to go into acceptance? So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, so we've got these all these emotions on this cushion, and it's amazing how people don't know how they're feeling. Like,
Mm.
and I say to everyone out there, socially, no one really cares how you're feeling. It's just you know, just a greeting, basically. It's, hey, how are you? Um, and you're socially obligated just to say good. If you said, "Oh, I'm feeling rather distorted right now," people would just be like, "Oh, well, yeah, 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 don't get deep on me."
Yeah.
They just want to hear good. Yep, cool, and then we can keep going in our
Even if you went
social.
the other way and said, I'm fucking amazing, I'm incredible, they'd be like, whoa, settle down.
Yeah, totally. I do that sometimes. I say I'm
Yeah.
super fantastic, and people are like,
Ecstatic.
"What?" Anyway, so when someone says good, it doesn't give us anything to work with. It's like a beige bit of canvas. Yeah, there's no context, there's no color, there's no depth, there's no substance. Um, so now they're having to give a very mindful and deliberate response. They have to stop, they have to check in with themselves.
Hmm.
How am I feeling? Which one of these words resonates with that feeling? Oh, I didn't even know that I felt flabbergasted. Right, okay, I'm feeling flabbergasted. Awesome, and that just kicks off our whole session now. Oh, what are you flabbergasted about? Oh, well, listen, and why are you flabbergasted? So it's a really cool intro into a session, but it's great for them because they start learning how to name what they're experiencing.
Yeah, it's cultivating emotional intelligence and emotional awareness, because
Totally.
oftentimes when you start on that process where people only notice the extremes, so like they'll know if someone really pisses them off, they'll notice that they're emotional, or someone really makes them sad, they notice they're emotional. So I think that they have these emotions, 2% of the time, but the more you go into this work, you realize we're always feeling something, like
Mm,
always. And it can be more subtle and to different degrees, but we're always feeling something. So it's like this constant kind of check in with how am I actually feeling. It's a good way to start
yeah.
the day.
Totally. But then we can decide, am I choosing to feel this way or have I been triggered? And have I just ended up reactively in this space? Oh, yeah, okay, I didn't choose to feel this. What would I rather choose? That would I have to let go of? So they can all of a sudden, yeah, and you're right, it's all based, which is what we're specializing in, is developing people's emotional intelligence. And self-awareness is the first step in that. So you can't change anything until you're aware of it. All right, I'm aware of it, and now self-management is the second one in EQ. Right, okay, now I can actually start to self-manage and self-regulate my emotions and start shifting into a different part of the spectrum. And it's so important for people to realize that mental health is just a spectrum of emotions, and we need to experience all of them. It just becomes problematic when we're, the word you used before, marinating
Mm.
in the unpleasant end of it. I had a client the other day. He goes, I want to get rid of my anger. I said, no, no, anger is necessary. We need anger. It just becomes problematic when you're experiencing it too much, and you don't even. He came in thinking he had anger issues, and he goes, I get angry. I said, no, I think there's a difference. Anger, I don't think, is a mood more than a feeling. I think we feel frustrated, we feel agitated, but that creates a mood or a sense of being angry.
Hmm.
Would you agree with that, or what are your
Yeah,
thoughts
I
on that?
agree. I think anger, the way most people use it is it's a secondary emotion, so it's a defense mechanism.
Are you
Um,
thinking of Tina Turner right now?
no, I wasn't actually. What did I
What's love
say?
got to do with it? It's
Ah,
second-hand emotion.
what's anger got to do with it? Um, so it's a secondary emotion. So normally anger's a bodyguard for sadness or hurt.
Yeah.
So oftentimes with people who have got this anger, in inverted commas, issues, I'll say, well, what are you actually sad about? What are you hurt about?
Mm,
Because normally
mm,
when we've got anger problems, we've got this deep hurt and sadness inside that, especially women as well, but especially as men, the anger just comes to the surface because anger is an easy one for us because it's seen as this masculine emotion. We saw it growing up normally with males and that kind of thing. So it's a much easier place to go to than sadness or hurt. So the anger sort of stands bodyguard over the sadness and hurt. So I often try and do a little bit of digging. But like you said, we don't want to get rid of anger. Like we need anger. Um, it's a human emotion, and we have it for a certain reason to let us know that our
yeah.
boundaries are being crossed.
And it's like anxiety is a bodyguard for being afraid
Yep.
or being hurt. It's like I'm going to keep you safe. The the anxiety that I was experiencing many moons ago was keeping me safe, preventing me from leaving the house. So it was my bodyguard. We've spoken about that heaps. So yeah, I think it's great for people to come into this understanding of right. We've got all these emotions. Some feel pleasant, some feel unpleasant. They all vary to different degrees. As humans, it's really important and healthy for us to experience all of them from at times. But so the unpleasant ones where anger, guilt, depression, anxiety. In Mindfit, we term them as suffering. Those
Hmm.
four, are suffering, and yeah. So we say there's necessary suffering and unnecessary suffering, and it becomes unnecessary when you just compound it, or when
Yep.
someone dies, and obviously we're going to feel sad and a various array of emotions, but as soon as we go, it's not fair, then that's when it becomes unnecessary suffering.
Yeah, that makes complete
Because
sense.
a sense of fairness is a cognitive distortion. So
Yep. Yeah, yeah, we would say it's a similar thing. It's like goes from this, it's just an emotion, and then it becomes a state that we're in,
mhm,
and then if
mhm.
we maintain that for long enough, it becomes a trait. And this is when
Yeah,
people come and they'll just say, well, I've always been an angry person, or this is part of my personality, or I
it's just
did
how I
I
am.
I did a personality quiz online, and I'm this quadrant of the personality type and
ASDF
that
or
kind of
something.
thing. And it's
I'm a
like, yeah,
Capricorn.
I mean, yeah, yeah. Well, what's that meme? It's like, um, no, Susan, you didn't do it because you're a Capricorn. It's because you're a cunt. Stop blaming it on your star sign.
Mars is in retrograde this week, so
Fucking Mercury's always in retrograde, it seems. I've got something every week going, oh, can you feel the energy of it in retrograde? I'm like, when's it not in retrograde? Um,
what's
I,
the opposite of retrograde?
I don't know. Gatorade.
I was thinking Gatorade too.
Oh, yeah? Oh,
Oh,
shit. Um, what were we on? Yeah, so we go from this like this temporary emotion that we don't have the awareness and we don't have the tools and everything to be able to work through, and so it becomes a state. So it's like this frustration, the May that could have been hung around for half an hour and we could have worked through it, then all of a sudden sticks with us for days, and we're just stewing in this anger for days, and then it keeps
so
going. And
think while you're talking, think about listeners. Just think about a neurological pathway in your mind, and it can go up or it can go down. It's like a fork. And what's happening is that this protein is traveling down the bottom fork and then around, back looping it back around on itself. So it's just deepening and ingraining. It's like going to the park and seeing all this wildlife just walking down this track. It's gonna make it more clear and apparent that there's traffic going down that pathway. So yeah, that's where we feel it the first time, but if we keep doing it, as I said, it becomes a state. And for us, it's like it's more like a mood. So the feeling of fear becomes a mood of anxiety or a state of anxiety. And then when you keep doing what you're doing, because that's all you know how to do, then it becomes a pattern or a behavior. Or
Yep. Yeah, it does, and
so
then you create the story. So you've got the feeling, and then the story that validates the feeling, and they keep looping on each other as well. And then
as Ram Dass says, then you then you what's he say? Something about then your ego starts resonating with it, and you fall into that's my role. My role is
mm,
I am anxiety. I have anxiety.
yeah,
You know?
yeah, and then you'll read an article that says you know, even an article like Melissa had a client the other day. She was saying, and basically her doctor or whatever just said, yeah, you're stuffed for life and got to be on meds for your whole life. And so now that just adds to the story of this is, oh, I've got something inherently biologically wrong with me, and that the story gets
What
more deeply embedded.
we had a client, and he was hell bent on trying to make me say that he had a chemical imbalance because he'd heard it from a psychiatrist, I think, that
Hmm.
he's got a chemical imbalance. So he just was deep in this attachment to this label of he has a chemical imbalance.
Hmm.
And I was trying to explain to him that your beliefs create your thoughts, they create your feelings. So the kind of thoughts you have create a chemical reaction that creates a sensation, a feeling. So if you've got a chemical imbalance, what is an imbalance? Like, what is all the chemicals over this side of your brain instead of over this side of your brain? Like, what's the chemical imbalance?
Yeah. So it's yeah, before we get into this, Nick and I both aren't doctors, so don't take any medical advice
I'm a
from us.
gynecologist, but
But
what's that T-shirt? I'm not a gynecologist, but I'll take a look.
I haven't seen it.
It's,
Oh,
haven't you?
oh my
It's
God,
terrible.
that's
I
a
reckon that.
shocker.
Remember that dude that I said,
The
MILF
sticker?
Hunter,
Yeah,
the
he
MILF
needs that.
Hunter. I
He would
reckon.
have had that shirt on, and he'd have a mullet. Oh mate, that's hilarious. Um,
Yep.
walk down the streets of Melbourne or some major city and I was doing a random survey and I stopped people in the street and asked them, hey, what causes depression or mental illness? 9 out of 10 of them would say it's a chemical imbalance in the brain, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And even a select few of those would even go as far as to saying it's a lack of serotonin in the brain. Okay, so that's
Mm.
specifically that's the neurotransmitter because most antidepressants are
Hmm.
SSRIs, which are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which means there's a lack of serotonin in the brain. So if we add more serotonin in the brain, it'll rectify it. Even calling them antidepressants, it's like, oh, I've got depression. This is an antidepressant. Now there has never, ever, ever, ever been any recorded science that shows that there's a lack of serotonin in people with depression. There's actually not a test that can be formed in a live human being to test their neurotransmitter activity, right? It's actually impossible.
Do you
Um,
mean that the pharmaceutical industry is making heaps of money off? No.
oh well, they allocate some of the bigger ones allocate over $1 billion a year just to fight lawsuits, because people have.
Why would they do that though?
Ah,
Like,
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. So look, that's it's so interesting that it's never, and even mainstream psychiatry came out in the late 90s and early 2000s and even said the chemical imbalance hypothesis. So that's what it's called. It's called the
hmm.
chemical imbalance hypothesis because it was just an idea, right? And mainstream psychiatry, like I'm talking like the head of the APA, American Psychiatric Association, come out and said no serious psychiatrist ever truly, took seriously the chemical imbalance hypothesis. Yet, if I stop not people in the street, 9 out of 10 would tell me it was a chemical imbalance, and it's like, well, why is that? And it's because there's a
What would you
lot of
say it is?
what would I say? What is?
If you stopped yourself in the street and said, "Hey," and surveyed yourself.
Maybe I'll
Hey,
do that.
hey, mate, what's depression? What would your answer be?
But it'd be a much longer answer than that. I'm like, it's a number of factors. It's a human with unmet needs. It's a human who has, suffered from trauma. It is a human that is not feeling socially connected and not feeling connected to themselves. But at the end of the day, it's a human with unmet needs, which is manifesting in this depression, or it can manifest as an anxiety. It can manifest as addiction. It can manifest as borderline personality. Put whatever label you want to put on it, and that's not to say medication doesn't have its place in acute situations, but these things were never designed to be taken long term, because the long term effects are way worse than the issue that they're
So
trying
hang
to address in the first place.
So if depression is unmet needs, and then you,
Well, that could be one of
uh,
them, one of
yeah,
the
but then
reasons.
you are given medication and put on this for life because you have a chemical imbalance, you then become codependent on that medication. So then you don't actually learn how to meet your own needs and become emotionally self-sufficient. That's
And
like a,
it ties into our as a society, our need for a quick fix. Like I wish antidepressants did what they said they did. Like I wish you could take a pill and your depression would go away. Like it's great, but it's instant gratification. It's just wanting this thing to be like bang, gone straight away.
why do you wish
Why do I wish?
that antidepressants worked?
Because then people who were deeply depressed wouldn't be depressed anymore. But it's like
That
it's a hypothetical that would never happen. I'm just
I
saying,
know,
you know,
but they wouldn't learn anything of value.
correct.
And this is exactly why I changed my business model. Because when I was state of mind health, people had come to me and using hypnotherapy and whatnot, I'd do a lot of waving of the magic wand and suggestions and all this sort of stuff. And they'd leave feeling lighter and better and amazing. But next time life happens, they'd come back and, Nick, I'm depressed again. Where's your magic wand? Oh, here it is. Got another one off eBay. Rightio, we're good to go. And I just realized after many years that I was just enabling them to stay in that circle. So it was just, now with Myndfit, we're actually teaching them and giving them these tools and resources. And the second fundamental is needs, basic human needs. So we're teaching what their needs are and how to meet their own needs instead of outsourcing their happiness and then getting really, really sad because it's unfair that this didn't happen and then
Mhm.
getting depressed about it.
Yeah, it's because that
That's
can also, and this is one of the reasons I'm sure you changed your business, because it just creates this session dependence as well. Because like you have a fish in a toxic fish bowl, and it's full of toxins, and it's not doing too well in that fish bowl, and then it jumps out of the fish bowl and goes to see you or me or whoever for a session. And like you said, you wave the wand, you do a bit of work, and all of a sudden some of these toxins start coming out of their body, and they're like, oh fuck, I feel really good. That was fantastic. But then they go back into the toxic fish bowl. And then what happens? That's like getting the toxins accumulated again. Like, sure, I need to jump out and see Nick or Ryan again, then back in and back and back. And there's no long term results there. It means we keep having to see people for years and years and years, without making really true progress. So yeah, it's so important to arm people with the tools, but also make sure they're looking at their environment at the same time. It's a lifestyle.
well, yeah, this is why we structure our programs in a certain way because we don't want to create that codependency. I've got a client who's gone from weekly to fortnightly, and he messaged me and said, "Nick, I need a session, this week. Not, I can't wait till next week, and blah blah." And I just send him a text back saying, "Mate, just check in whether it's unnecessary or necessary suffering. If it's necessary, let it in and then let it out. If it's unnecessary, find the distortions, find the irrational beliefs that are creating it, and see what you can do with it. Call me tomorrow if you're still struggling."
Yeah.
Didn't hear from him until the next session. He goes, "That was awesome. Thank you so much," because I panicked and I went looking for my crutch
Yeah.
and you went, "I'm not going to be there for you. I'm not going to allow you. I'm not going to create a codependent relationship with you." And so he said, I hated you at the time, but I really, really appreciated what you did for me."
Yep.
And I said, basically, I trusted you, and I unspokenly told you to trust yourself.
Yeah. 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 That's really beautiful, actually. It's amazing because where people don't understand that we can, self-manage a lot more than we think, because it's that initial, I get overwhelmed, and then it's like, bang, I've got to go to my crutch. And like you said, that can be, I need to book in for a session, and not just alcohol or, junk food or things like that.
Antidepressants, or
Antidepressants, yeah. And so the thing is, antidepressants then are a difficult process to come off. At the center, we probably 2/3 to 3/4 of people who came in were on antidepressants or antipsychotics, and you can't just come off them cold turkey. You can. Some
Mhm.
people did, but you really shouldn't. It needs to be done, weaned off very, very slowly,
Structured. Yeah.
because we're talking about, if you stop in cold turkey, like, they call them side effects, but they should just call them effects. I hate the word side effects. Oh, these are the side effects. No, they're all effects.
Imagine this,
Basically.
and this is a side effect of your chemical imbalance. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
what? Nothing in that sentence makes sense.
yeah. They the kind of final nail in the coffin with that hypothesis, even though the marketing has been so good that people still believe it, was that they would do autopsies on people's brains. So I'll try and explain this because most people will be listening. Neurotransmitter is a chemical in the brain. So we're talking about serotonin. And so in between, there's two neurons. And so different neurotransmitters travel in between the neurons. And that space in between the neurons.
They're transmitting
they're tr-
messages from one neuron to the other.
That's right. And so
Yeah.
there's a presynaptic cleft and a postsynaptic cleft, which is the end of these neurons. And then there's the gap in between them is the synaptic gap, basically.
Let's turn it into a metaphor. So there's like a river, and on
Mhm.
one side of the river, there's the
What will
transmitter is the raft that goes across the river,
Okay, yep. And there's docks.
ferrying. Yeah.
And so either side of the river there's docks that these boats can
Yes.
dock at. And they are called receptor sites.
Yeah.
And so what happens when I start to take something that increases serotonin? So an SSRI, what it does, it blocks serotonin receptors. So it blocks up those docks. So the serotonin boat just gets sort of stuck in the river kind of
So
thing because it can't dock.
the union comes along and shuts down the dock.
Yeah, so the serotonin can't dock. So what happens? There's a whole bunch of serotonin boats in the river that can't dock. So this is
Oh
the idea
God.
that now I have more serotonin floating in my brain. Now, because our body, which our brain is a part of, is so smart and is always trying to seek homeostasis, it starts to cut off the dock.
Balance for those
Balance.
familiar with that word.
So it starts to cut those receptor sites for serotonin. So it essentially uninstalls those docks, because it's like, I've got so much serotonin floating in the brain, I have too much. I need to start removing the receptors or the docks
Mm.
to create some sort of balance again. Okay.
So it's like the otters have come in and dammed the river, and all this serotonin is
Yeah.
just building and building.
Yeah.
So
I love otters.
because
Otters are such a great creature, by the way.
they're cool. So the docks are closed from the bloody union mob, and then the otters have come in and dammed the river as well. So it's just all a
Yeah.
perfect storm. It's all blocking. Nothing is moving. It's all building and building, and so
Yeah.
you gotta clean it out somehow.
Yeah, and so what happens? That they're not just closed the docks, but the serotonin docks they're gone. They've been uninstalled.
Yeah, they've pulled down. Yeah,
They've pulled down,
dangerous work
right?
site.
And so what happened, because I said you can't measure neurotransmitter activity in a live human being, you can check receptor sites on someone who's just died. So there'd be
Mm.
people who would have donated their body after they died to science. And so they would do autopsies on patients who had depression, clinical depression. And when they checked their brain, they'd be like, oh, there's much less receptor sites for serotonin on the neurons in their brain. So this proves the fact that there's a lack, the problem is a lack of serotonin in the brain, right? But what they'd done, all these autopsies they were done on people that, yes, they had depression, but they'd also been on medication, SSRI medication. So they said, okay, we need to actually do autopsies on patients who have been diagnosed with clinical depression, but have never taken SSRI medication. And when they looked at their brains, they had the exact same amount of serotonin receptor sites or docs as a normal healthy human being would have. Okay, so this is when we were starting to find out that the problem that a lot of these drugs were supposedly trying to fix is actually causing more of the problem in the long term. And this happened as well with medication for dopamine in schizophrenics, the exact same thing. So it's it's interesting that this was about 20 years ago that we found all this out, yet the idea is still very prevalent in society, because we want a diagnosis and we want a quick fix, and that is our culture that we live in. That is our culture. I need to buy this now. I need to go and have this experience now, and it's this immediate gratification as opposed to delayed gratification that gets us into so much trouble.
And that's all the ego. Well done, Dr. Ryan. That was really.
I'm not a doctor. No, I'm not a doctor. And like I said,
hi everybody. Hi, Dr. Nick.
If like people who are listening to this who are taking antidepressants might get a bit triggered, and I'm like, whatever you do, don't fucking stop taking them. Have a discussion with your doctor if it's something that you're interested in looking at. Because
that's what we do. When someone comes in and they're on medication, and usually there's no plan for it. It's just, here you go on medication.
Mm-hmm.
I always say, can I link in with your GP and your psychiatrist to work, so we as your support network can work together, and to set a goal to see if it's possible for you to come off this medication through cognitive retraining and healing and all that sort of stuff. Is there the need for you, if we can straighten your mind out, do you still need to stick those? Can we call this podcast "What's Love Got to Do with It"? Because the antidepressants are like a secondhand emotion. It's just, I've just got Tina Turner singing the whole time now.
I'll find a picture of Tina Turner for the thumbnail.
Yes.
See if Shane will be happy with that one.
I'm imagining him driving along right now. I'm just getting so triggered. How is your dearest partner in crime? How is Mel?
She's good. Yeah, to give a bit of context for those listening, Mel was crook for a week and a bit, and so I was trying to juggle so many things. Anyway,
you turned into James Blunt.
I got very blunt. I get very blunt. I do, and I created did the editing of the show and sent the thumbnail to Nick to post. And anyway, our good friend Shane, said, "Look, is Ryan not even trying anymore? Like, what's it called? The last episode, the random show, and this picture." And I was like, "Well, he can." I was like, "He can fucking do it then." I'm trying to juggle a sick partner, a 2-year-old running a business. Just give me a break, Shane. All right.
That was awesome.
So yeah, so it's an interesting topic. It's a very interesting topic. It's
but it's important as well, because there's so much misinformation, but there's such a lack of education as well.
We've spoken about it before. Like, did you see? We had Christine Morgan on the show,
yes,
who's the CEO of the Mental Health Commission, and they undertook this big royal commission into the mental health care system. And I posted on our Facebook page the other day from the ABC saying that the results are in, and it's an absolute fucking disaster the way that we've been treating mental health. And it's like, I wrote, I'm like, for those of us who have been in the system and also work in the industry, it's like, surprise, surprise, motherfuckers. Like, we know shit. Like, we know. So, and up until this point, I know you even asked Christine when we were on the show, Nick, it's like, is just medication and a mental health care plan, is this going to be the way moving forward? And clearly it's not. So it's, I'm interested to see where it goes, because right now it's like, it's taken so long to finally admit, yes, it's a bloody disaster what we've been doing, but now it's like, what do we do from here? And that doesn't mean that medication and standard mental health care plans just get removed. It just means,
no.
we need a massive
Don't
new
don't
menu of
throw the
options.
baby out with the bathwater. And we're not looking to blame anyone. Say it's you don't want to get into destructive thinking about it,
Mhm.
but it's just an acknowledgement that the system's not working. No system's perfect, so everyone's doing the best they can.
Yeah.
But we can always look to improve and get better. So we might extend another invite out to Christine and see if she wants to come back on the podcast to talk about it now that the verdict's in.
Yeah. No, I would love that. I'd love to speak to her about that. I had someone email me like they're doing some, applications where you can sit on a committee in your local area and talk about solutions. But even I read like the application form and everything, and the whole thing my whole body constricts. It just starts to shut down.
Mine's constricting just listening to you talk about it. I'm just picturing all the red tape and all the toxicity in there and all the it just would
Even
not
the
be a
application
healthy
form
environment.
was red tape. I'm like, oh my
Oh,
lord. So yeah. So look, I mean, the admission of something not working is the first step, but it's going to be what's going to happen moving forward, which is going to be really interesting because we've known for years now that there needs to be change afoot, and you know, I hope that happens, and I hope we can start to move away. I think a lot of it has to do with even just having a diagnosis model. You know, there's a I'll read this. I'm reading a fair bit on polyvagal theory with Stephen Porges at the minute, and which is really really interesting. But there was a quote in his book. If you can just talk for a second, Nick, while I find it.
say it again because it just went a bit glitchy. You sound like an awesome guy to hang out with. You know how to party. What are you reading?
I'm reading a lot about polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges.
Yeah,
Um,
there it is. Polyvagal theory.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So there's
Can't
a
wait to
really,
bump into you at a party. What are you
yeah,
up to these days, mate? A bit of polyvagal theory. Yeah, just yeah. Are they new bands? No, it's just polyvagal
well,
theory.
it's
It's just
very
it's what I'm
important.
into these days.
It's very important. I also just finished a book on the history of how we've treated people who are insane or have schizophrenia from the 1700s up until now. We'll talk about that on another show. It's so disturbing.
Was
Um,
there a chapter of burning them at the stake or?
Basically, like it doesn't go that far back, but it's yeah, let me read this out first and then I'll talk about that.
Okay.
Because this is the whole, diagnosis model that we're stuck in at the minute, which is how psychiatry and a lot of psychology tends to work. So Stephen Porges in his book just says there's long been an assumption if you give the disorder a name, it will lead to improved treatment and will provide better understanding of the disorder. However, it appears that diagnosis, especially within the area of mental health, have had a greater impact on the finances of clinicians than on understanding the mechanisms underlying the disorder that would lead to improved treatment. In general, diagnostic labels provide the clinician with the ability to use certain billing codes required by insurance, although labeling psychiatric disorders has had little impact on understanding the neurophysiological mechanisms.
Cash is king, baby.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's that's follow the paper trail, Back to
Mm.
how the history of how we've treated the people who are mentally ill. Yeah, so literally, you said burning at the stake. It was literally they would torture people early on in the asylums because the theory was that what separated man from beast was the fact that we could reason. So those that weren't reasoning properly were closer to barbaric animals. And so if we put them in cages and physically tortured them, then that would help them distract them from the pain in the mind. So people were put in cages, and there was all these they were seriously like torture devices, and like putting them in what was called these water boards and all this kind of rubbish. And then it evolved. It was so funny because then maybe 100 years later, it was like the opposite, where they said they're too intelligent for their own good, so they're too creative. And so this started the whole idea of electroshock therapy, frontal lobe lobotomy, where we would stick an ice pick through people's eye sockets and separate the connections between their frontal lobes and the rest of their brain, because they were too creative and intelligent for their own good, and that was what was causing all their pain. And then once that was seen as the wrong thing, then medications were introduced, which were basically medical lobotomies in some sense. And speaking about science, like I love science as much as the next person, but we've got to understand that science ain't always very correct, and what we think is correct at the time turns out to be absolutely ludicrous later on, because frontal lobe lobotomy at the time in about the 1950s was seen as the gold standard, not just treatment but cure for mental illness.
But science's whole thing is to continue to disprove itself, which is so weird. It's like meteorology. You can be so wrong, and that's okay. Like it's and that's why we use Stoicism and Buddhist philosophy, because it's been around 2,500 years. It's not the latest science. Like all that stuff there that you're just speaking, it's incredible, because it just, to me, all it signifies is how, in a literal sense, ignorant people are. None of us have any fucking clue, really. So everyone's just guessing. It's just, oh, I'm going to guess and stick a fucking ice pick through your eye.
yeah.
It's, oh, no, let's guess and burn someone at the stake. No, let's guess. Like my dad, my biological father had, uh, was finally diagnosed with bipolar, so manic depression back then.
Yep.
And self-medicating for many, many years. Finally got diagnosed after he separated from my mum, and was admitted to a psych unit in Frankston Hospital, and given electric shock treatment, which triggered the motor neurone disease gene in him, and he ended up dying of motor neurone disease.
Mm.
So it's just, it's yeah, it's so, if you step out of it and look at it objectively, it's just so barbaric the way that we treat people who are different. And it all comes, for me, it comes back to the ego. I don't like that you are that way. You are different to me. So therefore, I'm going to put you in a straitjacket or in a padded cell, or I'm going to operate on your head
Yeah.
because I think I'm right and I think you're wrong.
Yeah, it's funny, like all of these, what I learned in this book, like all of these, studies and all these things that were happening, they were being measured by, you know, there was the subjective experience of the person being treated was never taken into consideration. Like that
No,
wasn't
it
even
was
a
always the
factor.
observer.
Yeah, it's like how sedated can I keep this person so they won't have episodes and that kind of thing. And the
But it's fear. It's fear. We are afraid of them having an episode. We are afraid of them being different. We are afraid of them, talking about things that we don't understand.
yeah,
So let's numb them and medicate them, which makes us feel better. It's got nothing to do with the patient, inverted commas. It's all about making us feel safe as a society. Let's make us feel better.
exactly. Yeah, that's why I think there was some places that were helping schizophrenics by community support. So there was no, you know, doctors or anything involved. There was
Mm,
just sort of very compassionate, empathetic people who would give them food, treat them nicely. And if one of them in particular said, "Oh, the aliens are, coming to pick me up at 2 p.m. on Thursday, and I've got to be in this field at 2 p.m."
mm.
Instead of putting them in a straitjacket, the person said, "All right, I'll take you." And
Yeah,
they
let's
went
go
to
to the
the
field.
field, and the guy was like, "Oh, guess they're not coming today." All right. So his
Yeah.
experience was validated, and all of a sudden he can start to unravel his own, um, you
But
know,
let's live
plan.
in their model for a minute, not try and fit them into our model. Let's work with them
Yeah.
instead of against them. And it has, like, I had a client, and I think I spoke about her once, and she came in for some anxiety, and we're doing some hypnotherapy, and all of a sudden she started talking about being on a different planet, and her name was Zelda or something, and she just went completely into a different reality. And I just had to follow her, and I had to continue as a therapist working in her reality. And we popped out the end of it, and she's like, "Wow, that was interesting." I went, "It certainly was. How you feel?" She goes, "Feel great, good, okay." I didn't tell her that she was having a psychotic episode, or, I didn't. I just stayed present with her and guided her through whatever she was experiencing. Because who the fuck am I to say it was real or not real? Like, it was her reality, and that's what I had to work in.
Exactly. Her subjective reality, which is as real as everyone else's subjective reality.
When I did that, the Happy Group, I created a 12-week program for people, for a local company in Mornington, that their clients were long term in the system, and all had mental illness diagnosis. And I said to them, just leave your labels at the door, just come in as people. Yeah, and we're going to call this the Happy Group. It's not a mental illness group. It's the Happy Group. So every week they'd be start thinking, "Oh, I've got to go to the Happy Groups there," and so that would subconsciously start creating this picture. And 6 weeks into it, this dude stood up and he had, bipolar, and he was very angry and bitter, and he just basically, in the most elegant way I'd seen, said what he'd learned through what I'd been teaching him over the last 6 weeks was, he's in a lake, he gets thrown out of the lake, down the river, hits every rapid on the way down, ends up in another lake. Just as he starts feeling comfortable and getting there, thrown out of that lake, down the river, hit every rock on the way down, ends up in another lake, and this has been happening his whole life. And he said, finally I've learnt that I can't control it, I can't change it. That is bipolar. That is the way my brain works. Yep. So he's going into an acceptance, and he's like, when I get tossed out of the river, I don't live in fear. I live in trust that I will come to another lake, and I'm learning to surf. And so in learning to self manage in those lucid times, between the mania, he's the impact of his mental illness isn't as severe on his mental health, because he's looking after his mental health. He's getting his mind in shape as best he can in those moments. So, he's surrendered, he's embraced, he's accepted, he's not attached to a different outcome. He's not having an aversion to how his mind is operating. He's working with it instead of against it. And he said it's the best he's ever felt.
He's befriended it, befriended
Yeah,
that part.
but that was after 6 weeks. Like, this dude has been
Yeah,
in the system. He was 65. He'd been in the system since he was about a teenager.
yeah.
And in 6 weeks, through just some ancient philosophy, he learns to embrace and
That's
accept
so
and
good.
let go. And
It's so good. It's like if we just had that framework. I think our friend Matt Runnels, who I've had on the show, talks about it. He's diagnosed bipolar, and he said if I went in for that first appointment, and instead of being told you've got this disorder and
there's something wrong with
there's
you.
something wrong with you, and this is how we're gonna have to manage this for the rest of your life and medicate you. He says, instead, if they had told me, and he has a whole list of people who live with bipolar who
Yeah,
do
yeah.
amazing things in the world, if they had told me that, like, what a different framework I would have had. It's like whatever we resist persists, whatever we try and push away and not befriend is going to come. It's like, that's what I say with kind of anxiety. People try and push away their anxiety instead of saying it's feedback. And so it's a
Mm.
little tug of the shirt, and we're like, fuck off, fuck off. And then it's like pulling at the shirt harder, and we're like, fuck off. And we keep doing that for years, and it's banging us up the side of the head, and we're just consumed by it because we're not willing to befriend and listen to it. There's one of my favorite TED Talks, which I'm going to watch it actually later today because I haven't watched it in quite a while. It's called Eleanor Longden, The Voices in My Head. And I saw it all the way back when I was studying mental health and AOD at TAFE. And it brought me to tears. It's beautiful. And so she, at a certain age, when she was, I think, early teen, I can't remember, but she started getting voices in her head that would at first just narrate her life, but then start telling her to do stuff. And she told one of her friends, and the friends told her parents, and then she went and got told, how bad these voices are and you shouldn't listen to them.
Mm,
And from that point on, the voices started telling her to do really bad things. So,
mm,
at first it'd be like in school, go up and pour your drink over the teacher's head. And then it'd be, start setting fire to things. And they got to a point where all in their house, they had to change all of the cutlery to plastic because she would start trying to stab herself or other people because the voices were telling her for this. And she went through this for such a long, long time. And then all of a sudden, she came across a therapist who had a very different view of it and said, let's try and understand these voices and what they're trying to tell us, as opposed to trying to medicate them and make them go away. And I encourage everyone listening to just search it on YouTube. And anyway, she found out that these voices in her head were coming from a place of kind of trying to look after her initially, because she'd
mm.
been through some traumatic stuff early in her life. But because she had this framework that they were bad, 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 they started getting very evil, and she actually has a non-for-profit now called The Voices in Our Head or something of that nature, trying to teach people these things. And she says now, she goes, I still have that voice, but now it doesn't tell me to do bad things anymore. It's like, I
Just a
can work.
neighbor or something.
It's just a
It's a housemate.
neighbor. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
housemate that I live with. And it's just, if we can just get these initial, and this is probably part of, I hope, the revamp of the mental health care system in this country, is that initial
Please.
framework. Like, obviously, they're going to look at prevention as well, which is so important, but also this initial framework around a diagnosis, I think, is going to be so powerful in helping us as a nation.
Hopefully, the new framework has prehab and rehab. That's prevention. So, in Mindfit, we've got a reactive and a proactive program. Let's get you back in shape, and then let's keep you in shape. Um, but imagine walking into a clinician and they just, I've got these voices in my head. Oh, well, right, that's different. You're different to the norm, but there's nothing wrong with you. You're just different. You get out of that binary thinking. All these clinicians, it's so weird. They're all using binary thinking. You're good or bad. You're right or wrong. Instead of, which is a cognitive distortion. So these therapists are all in a distorted state, trying to treat people in suffering who need their help.
Because
So
there's a book of disorders. There's a DSM, a book,
yes,
the Diagnostic
if
and
you
Statistics
have this, you
Manual,
are wrong.
or it could be called Direct Source of Money. This giant it's a giant book, and so it's like, which category do you fit in of disorders? Well, the disorder is something. There's something wrong with you. But automatically, by just saying there's a disorder, there's an underlying tone that there's something wrong with you.
You just so when clients come in and we talk about suffering and I say, these are the three amigos that create this, unruly kind of thinking, spaghetti brain, cognitive distortions, and they create these emotional disturbances, which we call suffering. Have you ever experienced guilt? Yes. Have you ever felt, lived in fear and anxiety? Yes. Have you ever felt stuck or hopeless? Yes. That's depression. Have you ever felt really frustrated, agitated, angry? Yes. Congratulations, you are a human being. Well done. Here's your T-shirt. And it's just normalizing it so simply like that. Just you can see the relief wash through them. Oh, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm like, you don't need therapy. If you've been through trauma, you might need some healing. Yeah, okay, you're going to need some healing. But you need educating, you need teaching, you need guiding. You don't need therapy per se. It's such a terrible system.
Yeah, yeah. It's a relief to know that you're human, because we think that, if we're not educated, then we think that no one else is going through these feelings that we're going through. And you realize that every other human being on the planet at some point is going through what you're going through.
But
It is a
but
relief.
then and then sticking back within the law of nature that everything's impermanent, and the relief just deepens. Oh, this isn't permanent. This is no. It's actually going to ebb and flow. Sometimes you'll feel this. Sometimes you won't. But I always feel depressed. I'm going to challenge that belief. I I'm going to call you out as being rather irrational right now. I always feel depressed. I always feel like, no, you don't. No, you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you're in the shower and you can feel the hot water on you and it feels really nice. Do you feel depressed in the shower? Oh no, it's actually kind of nice. Aha! All right, you
Yeah.
don't
What about if
always
you're
feel.
watching that you were watching that comedy movie and you laughed at that funny
Mm,
Will Ferrell bit? Were you depressed then?
no,
No. But then
no.
it conflicts with their story. So they're like, no, because they want to set the story wants to say yes. The story
But
wants
that's
to
what
like,
we're doing. I'm simply, I'm not, I don't tell clients what to do. I'm just a mirror reflecting to them what they're doing, and then I just simply ask, how's that working for you?
yeah.
Is that healthy? Is it sustainable? Is that aligned with how you'd like to be feeling? No, it's not. Great, well, let's change it. Oh, we can do that? Yes, and you don't need therapy. What? Can I get a mental health care plan to see you? No.
No. That's what I like. That's one of my favorite lines too. After you have a chat, then you're like, how's that working for you? And they're like,
Mm,
no, not very
mm,
well.
yeah.
How are those stories working? Uh, because a story is like anything else in existence. It wants to keep existing. So if I have a
Mm.
story like I am depressed all the time, that that little entity wants to keep existing. So
Well,
it takes
96% of what we're doing is subconscious. So you've got this subconscious program, this subconscious narrative. 96% of the stuff that you do and think and you have no conscious awareness of. So if you've got a program that's operating within you that says, I am always depressed, guess what you're going to manifest? Guess what you're going to try and be creating? Guess what you're subconsciously going to be working towards? Being always depressed. That story narrative doesn't align with how you want to be, which is actually happy.
mm,
So yeah, it's not working for you.
change the story, change your life.
Oh man. All right,
Yeah,
Ryan. Well,
that
I
was
think we've
no,
blown enough brains for today.
we have. That was a good one, mate. Really appreciate that. And
Yeah, me too.
possible guest on next week. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
And yeah, all good, mate. What's on for you for the rest of the day there?
So we at my new place we haven't had any fencing up, so the poor old dogs have been sort of living in the house and out on the balcony.
Yep.
But yeah, we've got temporary fencing while we're waiting for M to finish her permaculture course.
Hmm.
Well, let's chat about permaculture. The philosophies of permaculture are amazing. So maybe we
I'd love
jump
to
into
talk
that one
about
day.
that.
So she's going to use our backyard as a sort of like a blank canvas for
Mm.
her to create a permaculture environment. So I've put our landscaping plans on hold. So we just stuck up some temporary fencing. So now I have to go and clean the balcony and rid it of looking like two dogs have been living on it for the last couple of months.
All of those footprints,
Yeah, well, footprints and um, internal becoming external.
fecal matter.
Um, yeah, so yeah, and you stay on top of it and you clean it, but it just, you know it's there. So
Mm.
just, I'm going to go and give it I've got a
Pressure washer.
pressure washer with a brush on it as well, and I'm just going to
Excellent.
just
Go for it.
dump a heap of organic cleaning products. Lots of tea tree oil is going to go on the balcony, and then I'm going to
That'll smell a
scrub
treat.
I'm literally going to scrub the shit out of it.
All right, mate. Pleasure as always, Nico. Listeners, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you all next
Thanks,
week.
listeners. Beauty. Peace out.
Peace.